A few people mentioned to me that they would like, if possible, if there's time, to have a third meeting. Now during the morning sitting, I made 2 announcements here in the meeting room. I don't want to continue making announcements, so this will be the last one. If you do wish to take a third meeting, why not sit in the balcony? And when the solarium, when and if the solarium is empty, then you can come in. Being aware that during walking time, people may come down. No need for feeling guilty or ashamed or whatever for being tired, and using the opportunity, if one really can sleep, to sleep, which can marvelously regenerate this body and mind. What I forgot to mention was one may be tired right in the middle of a round. Are we tired right now? Sort of heavy head, drooping eyes. The whole system go to lie down. So if that happens during a round of sitting, and we sort of agree not to get up, leave the sitting room, sort of to sit it out. How can one be with this phenomenon called tiredness or fatigue? It may be felt all over the body, and yet there's also the concept going on. I'm tired, I'm too tired to sit. Or whatever may be in this mind from long-standing habit about tiredness. And what it does and doesn't do, and what one needs to do about it. And it can be such a refreshing thing to abstain if possible. First one has to notice all of these ideas. But then not to carry on with living in the idea of the tiredness and all of its impulses to do or not to do. And just, if it were, questioning into what is this state right now. I don't mean formulating a question out of it and then sticking to that question. That's again removed from this live questioning of what is this when I don't know about it. When I see the difference between conceptualizing and thinking about it and just this, whatever it is, what is it really? One doesn't know. It's there, and will one continue thinking about it, or just allow this to come into a state of wakeful presence? You could say, wait a minute, you can't be wakeful while you're sleepy. Now that's an assumption, that's logic again. We're not talking about logic, but listening to this hum of sleepiness. How does it really hum? Not badgering it, allowing it to show itself. Let it be felt. Let itself be felt in a new way that is beyond what I've known about it for years and years. Maybe all kinds of things will reveal themselves in that innocent inquiry. not just the sound of airplane, which is suddenly there as the mind opens in questioning and wondering and being with what's there. Rattling of the motor, humming of the insects. I'm using the words not because I know that, just so that we're together on this. Maybe we would be very nicely together without the words too. But beside all of this stuff, what also may reveal itself here and there, like a little tip of an iceberg, is a strong resistance to waking up. Deep fear of it. May not be part of our story, but maybe we do long to keep on sleeping and dreaming the dream of our life. And with this impulse to keep dreaming, this fear of the uncertainty of waking without knowing. The assumed uncertainty. Actually, all of our uncertainties are bunched in sleeping and dreaming. You may not see it that way, but this is how it is, can be found out to be that way. Just being here in an opening, listening, attending. There's no uncertainty about that. If thought is quiet for a moment, next moment it may raise the doubt, and can that be seen as the activity of thought? Doubting, feeling uncertain, longing to create a new dream or continue the old one. Actually, this first talk is usually not about dreaming, but about listening, a new kind of listening. Right from the beginning, can we wonder whether there can be a fresh listening as this retreat begins in such beautiful clarity, warmth, so alive, inside and outside of hall, with what? You name it. Let me also say that by listening, I don't just mean with the ears. This question was brought up recently. What if somebody was hard of hearing or deaf? How could they participate in this? So let's, right from the beginning, say, we're using the word listening. I used to use more the word seeing, and then people said, well, how seeing is hard or listening is easier. But it doesn't mean any one separate sense, which may be strong or weak for any particular person. doesn't even have to do with the senses, but with their openness. The openness of perception, of being here in a new way, which was hinted at maybe last night and again first thing this morning. The clouds of concepts may be parting for a moment. And discovering a new way of being, which is immediate and in touch with hum and heartbeat and breathing and the people around one. Or are there all kinds of concepts about each other? Somebody recently told me, person seemed to have some knowledge about the brain, that the reason listening is maybe easier is that a relatively small portion of the brain is occupied or involved in listening, whereas a huge portion of the brain is occupied with visual inputs, with looking. Much more brain activity. And the person also held up his thumb and he said, face recognition alone is an area as thick as your thumb, which is considerable, because different thumbs have different thickness. So that's why facial recognition, not just somebody I've met before, we all know that hard to forget somebody you met before. And you can say hello and how are you? But probably connected with this thumb thickness and much more than that in the brain is association with who this person reminds me of, evoking the prejudicial mind, which is so pervasive in human beings, all of us. Somebody brought it up in the last retreat as a nagging topic, wouldn't die down for several of the first days. Why am I so prejudiced against black people? And he said, not in a gross way. There the reason takes over, but in a very subtle way. So, is a question like that, does it come out of exasperation or opening up an interesting field of watching, observing, without judgment? Not prejudiced against the prejudice, but watching it operate. So there's a little wisdom growing about how we function with each other. And so much prejudging and therefore not seeing or hearing each other freshly, as for the first time. Because you remind me of not only what you may have done in the past, but what somebody who looks like you, and this switches all automatically. There's no doer there, no intender, no culprit, except this fantastically interconnected brain of billions of neurons, trillions of them. Not just interconnected with each other, but with this whole feeling, sensing, emoting, tensing or stressing organism. So, as per this moment of starting a fresh retreat on a sunny morning, warm and yet so cool yet, can there be momentary listening to what goes on inside and out observing it, listening to it, attending to it. Use whatever word. The word is not important, but the state of being is so essential for being truthfully in touch. Not through ideas or concepts, but with what is actually there before we know it or after we've known it. Somebody told me this morning, we listened to your talks on tape in a group, and it's so arduous, just as you said last night, so arduous to really be there and listen. The mind, as we would say, slips away. Thought begins to spin. And even though the words may be heard, they're not really heard because of the spinning story, remembrance, whatever goes on. And there again, too, maybe some fear of listening to what is being said, because that may awaken us. It's not formulated like that in the mind. But the body-mind sort of knows what may threaten its habits, its grooves, and try to avoid them. And that may not be the total and only reason for not attending. Maybe in the beginning, the energy isn't there. I don't know. I mentioned before about this man in Sweden. People sort of related to that story, so I'm telling it again. Very energetic man has climbed the Himalayas and takes groups there of people. Sort of a meditation kind of hike. It's more than a hike. Very, very wakeful. And he was asked to do the taping of the talks, which he did. And in the first talk, as in this one, I mentioned how in the beginning, sometimes the first 2-3 days, a lot of stuff slips by that is being said in a talk. Not that this is a disaster, no disaster at all, it's just a fact, maybe a fact. And when one notices it, it's noticing something that's happened or has happened. And he said after the talk he was sort of hurt in his pride, that's how he reported, and he played the tape back. And he said, I missed about 50%. I hadn't realized it. And then playing it back 2 more times, he said, every time I realized I hadn't heard this or that. So that happens to us. That's why I breathe easy giving the sort of the same talks every time, once a month, because they're never quite exactly the same, because every one of us changes all the time. And one doesn't need to talk out of grooves. And yet, the topic, listening, authority, relationship with each other, it's the same for each talk. But it's so clear that when we're here now after whatever has elapsed since last time, we see things freshly, anew, or at least have a great chance, great probability for that to happen. So in listening to a talk such as this, what do we want to hear? We do want to hear something, don't we? Or are we arriving here very neutrally, just open? Or is there expectation in the mind? Again, can be a very subtle tip of another iceberg. To come upon it, expecting something, and maybe immediately or by and by noticing that this expectation, this wanting something, affects our listening, our attention profoundly. It sort of channels it or distorts it. What we want to hear and therefore what we don't want to hear. Being set for something, and if it doesn't happen, the disappointment. That's not what I came here for. I expected something different. It doesn't just refer to a talk like this is how we live. So constantly expecting something and living in that expectation, like iron filings pulled by a magnet into certain directions. This is this body. It can be experienced this way. When there is some dawning of attention or awareness of this expectant mind. Body-mind is not just the mind, it's this whole system directed toward something imaginary, hoping for something. A setup which is not conducive to this simple presence. And yet it can be come upon, it can be detected. Is there expectation in the mind? Do we want something to happen? Somebody mentioned to me, last time we met, you implied if you come to a 7-day retreat, something may happen in the course of the retreat. Now, of course, I'm here, waiting for something to happen. And the response that came was, the most amazing thing that can happen is to find oneself not expecting anything. In spite of that having been the motive for coming here, full of charge, energy. Because all of these ideas, things of what we want, of what we expect, have a charge to them, which this body laps up. Always in need of just some more energy, of enthusiasm or inspiration. And then when it is not fulfilled, the want, the expectation, a sagging, feeling sort of drained or depleted. And then the brain, is it on to the next possibility of hope or dream? Can one wonder about it? If one does, these things may reveal themselves subtly. And at a moment of coming upon this expectant body-mind and not going with it, realizing it's based on all kinds of perpetuation and maintenance of ideas which are not necessary, because what's going on right now? That was sort of overlooked, slurred over. And yet it's present all the time. Simple buzz and hum and breath and heartbeat. and such gentle, cool breeze touching the skin. So having been so educated, so geared to setting ourselves up to hear something in a lecture, in school, in church, or in a meditation place like this, can there just be the airplane in spite of this age-old setup? Or does the mind immediately say, does thought immediately say, well, yeah, there's an airplane and hum, but so what? It's not true listening. True listening does not evaluate or brings evaluation to light and listens again. Without evaluation. Even though for the time being the body does not seem to get its seemingly needed fix of inspiration, enthusiasm, and listening to that non-fixed body without prejudice, in a fresh way. It's often brought up by people during the first 3 days, sometime maybe later, but usually more in the beginning. Feeling sort of blah and bored, maybe after the first inspiration of being in this beautiful place with the beautiful plants and flora and views and food. Then this body so habituated to constant stimulation, so educated into constant stimulation, giving it and receiving it, day and night. When that starts to drop off, this expected stimulation or this habitual stimulation, there is what one can call a period of withdrawal manifesting. This feeling blah, flat, somebody said. Not really paining, but a little disappointment there too. I thought I would find peace and quiet, the beauty and harmony of it. Instead of it, it's all flat. So, just like what we started out with this morning, with tiredness or flatness, what is it really? Not to run away from it, which takes subtle attention to notice one is running away from it into judgment, hassling with it, or just trying to think of something to make up for the lack of outer stimulation. This mind is very proficient at providing constant videos, audios, to keep entertained, keep the body entertained, and the mind too. So when one finds this constant entertainment running, wondering, is that, what am I running away from something, or is there a running away from something? Because there's no I doing it. These things happen for each human being on their own. Nobody's fault. And if appears, yes, there is a running away from what then? What don't I like? What does feel uncanny or eerie? And to begin to listen to it with a new interest in this, what we may call flatness or withdrawal, but not conceptually, not dealing with it analytically, but experientially, immediately, as it is manifesting. It's there, it's showing, it's expressing, it's feeling and sensing. And need not be abandoned. Almost said, it may be a door, but if one thinks too much of this being a door, then there is this expectation again, well, when will it open? It doesn't yield to this kind of pressure. The openness is the no expecting any results, and just being there, listening, attending to what's there. Pleasant or unpleasant, flat, dry, or moist and stimulating. You could say, well, where does such attention come from? Such being, such listening. It doesn't come from any place, it's here. In the twittering bird and the buzzing fly. And the breathing organism. In the hills and pine floor. Sort of as though in this listening there was a getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, quieter and quieter and quieter, in just this one point of listening, attending. Which beholds the whole universe. Without knowing. Usually I spend some time of the first talk with authority. Not to make an authority out of a person who speaks, like me. The making an authority out of a person referring to this. One will accept and believe unquestioningly whatever this person says, and therefore atrophy in this capability that all of us have to look for oneself. Maybe good to hear somebody question something, put something clearly, but that is not to be believed in or carried around unquestioned, but to be examined. Either on the spot, right at the moment of listening, talking, looking. Is this really so? Is happening here too? Is it really so? This question is there all the time to sort of filter out stuff that doesn't belong or that may be distorting. So either instantly, is it really so? Can I see that? Or if it isn't clear, then not to reject it and not to accept it, but let it nag, as it were. I want to find out about this, all of what we talked about, the sleeping and the being with tiredness, the desire to continue dreaming. It occupies the mind if it is not clear, and because the mind is occupied with it, wondering about it, it may throw some light when the thing actually happens. Yeah, this is so. Now I see it. Now it's clear. So anything I may have said in the past about authority, not to misunderstand this, and yet to discover in oneself, we all have this tremendous yearning to find the one authentic authority who can tell us the way things are. We feel rejected almost, pushed away if somebody says, find out for yourself. And yet, I don't have this attitude of pushing people away. We talk ad infinitum about things. You can always bring up whatever isn't clear. And don't worry, sometimes people say, you've probably heard this for 20 years and I hate to bring it up again. No, if we're both here now, it's new, it's fresh, we can look at it with new ears and eyes. So to discover in oneself this desire for authority, to have authority to follow, and at the same time an inner rebelliousness against authority, which has been carried around in this organism since we were little, because we always had to do what we were told. We were so small, so helpless, so underpowered by overpowering adults. So there's this twofold thing, wanting it and hating it, desiring it and fighting it. And neither of it is necessary. We can just listen to each other and investigate, probe together, listen together, come upon something together, or alone. It doesn't matter. We are all one. There's in truth no separation. And yet, when it comes again to the question, what is my relationship with you? What is your relationship with me? Because this question is in minds of many people. How do I relate to you? The other day, a woman came into our living room, in the apartment, and she was quite shy, and she said, do I have to bow to you? And she was not sure at all what I would say. So what is our relationship with each other on this sunny, chirpy, hummy morning? Will we judge each other with this thumb-thick recognition of face? What you are, what you've always been or will be? Or will we respect each other? Respect, looking again with interest to hear each other, to find out about each other. I don't mean life histories. This moment is enough. Although if you want to tell part of your life history, that's all right too. Maybe we can hear that, listen to it, and go deeper. Where does the urge come to present oneself? The need. We can look at the whole thing in complete depth, meaning no prejudice, no judgment. Just listening to the utterings and sputterings of this human mind. So trained, so conditioned, and yet with such urge and yearning to be free. Free in looking anew, in listening freshly. We will end here for today.